Yep. I reckon you will. Yep.
Alrighty, I guess we're ready. Let's go ahead and grab a hymn book and open up to 4 hymns selected by Miss Louita. 2 of them I only know. So the other 2 we do by faith. All right, so that's what we're gonna try. 139. Great is thy faithfulness. Let's sing out on all 3. Here we go. Great is thy faithfulness, O God, my Father. There is no shadow of turning with thee. Thou changest not, thy compassions they fail not. As thou hast been, thou forever wilt be. Great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. On a second, here we go. Summer and winter, springtime and harvest, sun, moon, and stars in our perfect love. Join with all nature in manifold goodness, to thy great faithfulness, mercy, and love. Great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. Last one. Pardon for sin, melodies that endureth. My only rest to cheer and to guide. Strength for today, bright hope for tomorrow. Blessings all mine with 10,000 beside. Great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. All right, so we'll go to 224. 224. So this is one of those songs I was alluding to. No, if someone else knows it, I'm okay with them leading it. Sarah, do you know it?
I don't know, I haven't gotten there.
Sarah will lead it. Christina's here today. Christina, would you like to lead this? Kyle, did... No, I don't think any of us know it, so we're going to have to go with another one. I'm sorry. or they're all lying. So how about we do this? Can we do a selection here? Can someone just give out one they like to sing, and we'll do that? Diana. 344. Let's try that one. Now, if Louita doesn't know this, we're stuck. I just don't know what to do. Grace greater than our sin, I think.
I'll have you play it.
Oh, yeah. We'll get worse as we go. Here we go. Here we go. Grace the loving Lord, grace that you see our sin and our guilt. Young from Calvary's mount that bore, there the blood of the Lamb was There is, how about 308? Let's try that one. There is a Redeemer. Play a few bars and I'll hum a few things and I might get it. I'm terrible at songs. My wife can go all the way back to when she's 5 and still sing songs that she can remember when she's 5. I can't even remember a song I sang. Just okay. What did we just sing, by the way? So, all right, here we go. Amen. I'm sure some came in. I didn't get these out to everybody. Who still needs maybe a handout here? Okay. So you were the late ones, huh? Okay. Everybody else have one? All right, we're going to go to Isaiah 58. Isaiah 58. I don't know, maybe it's me, but I always feel like if these lights aren't on, it's dingy up here.
I mean, I really so appreciate that we have this now.
Amber, I said it publicly, I just telling you, okay? You make such a big deal about me not saying anything about it. I finally say something. You didn't hear it. You need some help finding it, do you?
You can only do one thing at a time.
Oh, great. We just hired her as our teacher. She can't find Isaiah. Oh, no.
Uh-oh.
All right. Isaiah 58. Interesting, the first year actually, this text was the text that helped me to accept that it was God's will for me to come to Websterville. And it's something that stood out with me because I find that this has been a lot of the ministry I've been involved in. And what I say by that, I don't mean it, when we get into this text, it's not to say, that Websterville need fixing. That's not what I'm talking about. It's that the ministry that Websterville has before us here in the very area is what I think this text is saying to us, okay? And you've heard me go here several times before. This text was even spoken to Bill several times. And so we're going to examine this. And again, I'm still working out this printer thing, why it cuts off at certain places, but we will continue to work on that too. If you haven't figured it out, I need a lot of work. Don't say a thing, Amber. Please don't say a thing. All right? All right, so let's get into the Word. We're in Isaiah 58. We've given Amber enough time to find Isaiah? Okay, good. We're there. All right. So we're going to talk about solving life's problems by the Lord's program, all right? We all talk about doing it the Lord's way, but a lot of times we find that we're really not. And so what was happening here in Isaiah, at the end of Isaiah, is we got a lot of topsy-turvy things going on. So let me just lay out where we've been in our studies the last several times that I've taught, and we'll tie it here to this. So we have taken several occasions to examine the practical aspects of prayer and promises. Anybody remember? I'm just asking you to remember, not asking you to say, but if you'd like to, I really would welcome that. It'd be like, wow, they really got it. But sometimes I don't want to put people on the spot, so I'm looking right at Amber, and she's like, please don't say anything. Please don't say anything to me. Now, the fact is this, though. When we talk about prayer, what is the word prayer at its root, at the very core? Remember, when we take this word and we parse it out in the Greek, we use the word like the word ask. We say it means ask. But when we break this word down, according to Strong's Concordance, it means to desire toward. To desire toward. And when we think of it in the aspect of, how do we often pray? We always pray, oh God, give me this, oh God, do that, oh God, fix that, oh God, I need more money, oh God, help my health. And what are we really praying towards? We're praying to my need. But the desire in prayer should be to God. And God, you're my desire in all of this. And in that comes our request. As we come to know that God, as we get into the presence of prayer and time with God, we begin to realize that my prayer sometimes may be amiss, like James writes about in chapter 4. We pray amiss because we want to consume it upon our lusts, right? Or we don't pray believing because we don't see God for the God He is and being able to provide. And so you've also heard me refer to prayer as the area of Spirit-led prayer. For instance, in Romans chapter number 8, when I pray, who intercedes for me? Who helps my infirmities? Who helps me in prayer when I don't know how to pray? The Holy Spirit, right? According to Romans 8. And when the Holy Spirit is helping me in that time of prayer, and that Spirit-led prayer, why would He lead me into a lie in prayer? Do you get what I'm saying? In other words, Spirit-led prayer is a confirmation to me God's going to do it. He's got it. Right? He's got it. And so, as I go to praying like that, why do I have to worry? Why do I have to keep coming back to Him? And He's got it. And then sometimes I might be Spirit-led by the reminder of the fact that, hey, it hasn't been answered yet, Lord. And He reminds me, oh yeah, we prayed about that one. He's got it, right? And so, prayer. What about promises? We talked about promises. There's at least 3,000 promises in the Word of God. And if we were to go around this room, there'd be some of us that could quote some just like that. And it's great that we can quote it. It's great that we can speak it back to someone. But the fact is, do we believe it? If God said it, we should be able to believe it. But we don't always do that, right? I was talking with somebody about just the aspect of Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall what? Direct your path. That's a promise. If I go to him and I ask him for some assistance on something, what's he going to do? If I ask him for food, bread, is he going to give me a rock? No. He's going to give me an answer that I can rely upon, and his word is something I can rely upon. God. It's a promise. And he said he would direct my path. Right? He said he would never forsake me, never leave me. But yet, sometimes we feel awfully alone. So what do I do in those times? I claim his promise. I don't claim what I feel. See, when I start to claim what I feel above what he promised, what am I doing? I'm elevating me above what he said. I trust me more than I trust God. Oh, that's a danger zone. All right? That's a danger zone when I start to trust what I think, what I feel above what God said. Wow. Be careful. Getting into some areas. And so, today we want to kind of take Isaiah 58, and we're going to look at another aspect of not just the prayer and the promises, but let's look at God's program. But notice here the way that Isaiah starts off. It's like these are really religious people trying to claim, trying to pray, trying to seek God, and trying to claim some things that he said, and God says, you're all off on this. You're all off on this. So here's how this goes, all right? So today we're going to combine it. I won't get into all the summary of the book of Isaiah that we get from BibleHistory.com, but let me read a few things out of this. Isaiah prophesied during one of the worst times of the history of Israel. The Israelites had become so corrupt that God was going to remove them out of his sight. He raised up the Assyrian army to be unmerciful and barbaric, ruthless even. We know that God called them from their distant land to come and destroy the Jews. Isaiah was living in Judah, the city of Jerusalem, during a time when King Uzziah had died. You remember that. Isaiah chapter 6, King Uzziah dies, and what happens? Isaiah lifts up his eyes and he sees what? The throne of God. And he sees the seraphims going around the throne, crying, holy, 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 right? His prophetic ministry lasted from 760 BC until 720 BC. Isaiah chapter 6 records the powerful vision that Isaiah received of God, the king of his throne. And the king called Isaiah to prophesy to his people. Notice this I have it underlined there. King Uzziah was a faithful servant of the Lord, and people felt secure under his leadership. But when he died, there was almost a panic. This is when the Lord showed Isaiah who was really on the throne. Can I just say that God is going to always knock down the things that we trust in if we're not trusting in God. He is the one is on the throne, and that's who we have to look to. He's the one that is the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. He's the one that wants us to have him as our all in all, as Paul would write. And so this is when the Lord showed Isaiah who was really on the throne, and Isaiah was terrified at that sight of holiness out of Isaiah 6. And when the Lord called him and asked him who will go with his message, Isaiah said, "Here am I, send me." So Isaiah is used tremendously to warn the people of Israel. And his message was a message about their idolatry and her foreign alliances, but they scorned him. They did not listen to his warnings and quickly destroyed nor did they quickly destroy their instruments of idolatry. Let me ask you something. Why do we have idolatry today? Obviously we do. But a lot of times we get into that idea that let's just take Fred up there on the bench, okay? Let's say that's our idol, all right? And, we often think that graven images are all that what God's referring to. But no, it's really much more. It's what we put our trust in ahead of God. What we serve, what we bow to, what we will give our time to, what we'll give our allegiance to, what we'll give our talents to, what we'll give even our tithe, our money to. That becomes our idol, and we are thus serving it rather than serving God. And so, idolaters are also superstitious. I came out of the Roman Catholic Church, got saved, and I was a very devout Roman Catholic, okay? I was that altar boy that was out there all the time. Hard to believe me in that black smock and the white tunic over thing, and me out there like this, and ringing the bells and sprinkling holy water sometimes, doing all that stuff. And there was one summer I was just so dedicated to it, I didn't realize all school year, I went to parochial school, so I went to parochial school and I was doing Mass once a week. So when they had sign-ups for summer, I just signed up my name thinking it was just once a week. I didn't realize I was signing up for almost every Mass for the summer in the morning. I was like there in the morning, I was there at night, I was doing this, I was doing that. And I mean, I was really into it. I was in parochial school, I was in the Roman Catholic Church, I was doing all these things. And I found this when I finally came to know the Lord and realized there was a God who redeemed and was on the cross and died for me, that guess what I was doing? I was obviously involved in idolatry in a graven sense, but I came to learn that I was also superstitious. Because when you're in that kind of religion where the mentality is that you've got to produce your own self-righteousness to appease God, and if you don't get God's appeasement on you, you've got to find another way to get God's appeasement. So what do? You wear the cross, or you get a scapular, or you get holy water, or you get a palm on Palm Sunday, and you leave it there till it rots all year long. Okay, now I say that, I hope you're not taking offense by that, but having been raised in that, I hope you understand I have a little bit of liberty in that and understand it pretty well. And so, with that, I understood that I began to get into this motion of, I have to appease God. I've got to appease God. I've got to appease God. And so I started to try to do things just right to appease God. If I do things just right, God's going to be happy with me and He's going to give me whatever I want. Are you with me? If I do just what I think God wants, He'll be happy. And I will be too. Guess what's happening here in Isaiah? It's the same mentality. They have been idolaters and they are now superstitious. And notice when we start in Isaiah chapter 58, verse 1, God says to Isaiah, "Cry aloud, spare not. Lift up thy voice like a trumpet and show my people their transgressions and the house of Jacob's sins." And you'll notice that I put a little bit of a definition here for transgression. From my Bible college days, transgression basically means stepping over the line with intent. How many times have you ever been with a child and you say, "Don't do that. Don't you do that. Don't you?" And then they do it, right? That's transgression. All right? And that's how the people of God were with Israel. Or Israel was with God. And he was like, don't do that. They do it, right? No fear of the Lord. Just stepping over the line on purpose. And then the word sin means the act of missing the mark. All right? They're supposed to be shooting for something, but they're shooting off. They're missing it. And so the idea is maybe shooting for God's holiness and just completely missing it altogether. All right? And so when we look at this, it goes, "Cry aloud, spare not." Verse 2 says, "Yet they seek me daily," he said. God said, "They seek me daily to know my ways." Now notice this, and notice why I underlined it in what I gave you, the handout. It says, "As a nation that did righteousness." Think about the wording. They sought me like they were a righteous nation. Get what I'm saying by that text? They seek me like they are a righteous nation. They come to church. They sing the songs. They even may say, "God bless you." Down south it's always, "God bless you. How are you doing, sugar?" And it's one of those things that, hey, they were saying all the right things, they were dressing the right way, they were putting on their religious smile. And he says they were a nation that did righteousness and forsook not the ordinance of their God. And they asked me the ordinance of justice, and they take delight in approaching to God. And he says, "Wherefore have we fasted?" Then they say back to God. See, he's saying, you're acting right. And then they're saying, well, if we're acting right, we're fasting even. We're doing this. "Wherefore have we fasted," say they, "and thou seest not." Can't you see what we're doing, Lord? We're in sackcloth and ashes. We're wearing this real scratchy material that's really hard. We're hot and sweaty. We're doing this for you, God. Why don't you see it, God? Why aren't you doing what we're asking, God? We're sacrificing, God. You see, that's what their attitude was. He says, and they have seen us not, and have we afflicted our soul, and thou takest no knowledge? Behold, in the day of your fast, ye shall find pleasure and exact all your labors. He's like, God's just saying to, hey, you're not getting it. And these people were saying, God, we want it, but we're not getting it. And so we see then here that this nation, a righteous nation, forsakes not the ordinance of God. A righteous nation seeks God for justice, and a righteous nation would delight in approaching to God. But these people, Israel, forsook the ordinances of God, sought not God for his sense of justice, did not delight in approaching God. How many of you know it happens? I'm not trying to be negative on anybody. You just know it happens. In our culture, more so maybe now than I can recall in the Northeast and areas, is this notion of, do we have to go to church? You know, why do I have to go to church? You mean I got to give again? You mean you actually want me to do what? Do you get what I'm saying? That's just the service, but that's an outward attitude of really our delight or not delight in God. Do you get what I'm saying? If I delight in God, it's not like, oh, I got to go to church. It's, hey, I get to go to church. I get to see God's people. I get to hear from God. I get to sing those wonderful songs, even if sometimes I don't know them. But hey, it's one of those things. We get to do that. It's a privilege. It's an honor. It's a joy. It's a delight. It's a reflection of people who delight in the Lord. These people didn't delight. They were, in essence, idolaters. The idolater's purpose in approaching God is never about finding and doing God's purpose. It's always about finding and fulfilling personal comfort. That's what the issue is here. Okay. So notice where this text begins to go. As we begin, it says in verse 3, wherefore have we fasted, they say. You don't see it. Verse 4 says, behold, ye fast for strife. God answers back through Isaiah. He says, you fast for strife and debate and to smite with the fist of wickedness. You shall not fast as ye do this day, to make your voice to be heard on high. Do you see why they're fasting? They want to be heard by God. They wanted to appease God. They wanted God to hear them and answer them according to their will. That's the whole purpose of their fasting. They're superstitious. Superstition is the result of idolatry. And they were not approaching God in the right way. And now God is addressing this. He says, the only reason you want this is because you're in strife. You're in a hard spot. And you want to win. You want to be heard. So verse 5 says, is it such a fast that I have chosen? In other words, did I say to do this way? A day for a man to afflict his soul? Is it to bow down his head as a bulrush and to spread sackcloth and ashes under him? Wilt thou call this a fast and an acceptable day unto the Lord? So Isaiah is speaking for God, and he's ridiculing them. And remember, he's not just saying, is this a respectable day of the Lord? Acceptable day of the Lord? No, he's saying, is this an acceptable day of the Lord? He was to put it out there like a trumpet. He was getting their attention. He was maybe standing in the temple, or he was standing on the steps outside the temple, and he's heralding this, yelling it. He's basically saying, can you imagine Elijah when he was ridiculing the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel? In other words, Isaiah had no respect to these people who were walking around fasting like, woe is me, you know. Oh God, please listen to me. No, he had no respect. He said, God doesn't like this. I bet that's just what they wanted to hear. Right? I bet it's just what they wanted to hear. And it goes on from there that, as we moving on to the next page in Isaiah 58:6, it says, is not this the fast that I have chosen, God says through Isaiah. So the idolater believes that their sacrifice should be meaningful enough to God to change their predicament. If things do not change, God was not appeased. So the logic of the idolater seeks another outward action that works in getting what they want. If that does not work, the idolater finds another God to do their bidding. Hence why some people will just leave church and leave God altogether. Okay? Not always, just simply saying that that's pretty regular. God didn't do what I said. God didn't do what I want. I'm angry with God, so I'm not going to give him what he wants. So there. And can you imagine, I mean, think about that. We don't accept that from children, but as adults, we think God's going to accept that from us. He doesn't. He's just kind of like, oh, really? Just like we would be as a parent with our own children, right? Oh, really? That's what you think. Okay. So, Isaiah 58:6 says, is not this the fast that I have chosen? To loose the bands of wickedness, to undo the heavy burdens, to let the oppressed go free, and that you break every yoke. Is it not to deal thy bread to the hungry, and that thou bring the poor that are cast out to thy house? When thou seest the naked, that thou cover him, and that thou hide not thyself from thine own flesh. This is the acceptable affliction he's talking about. You know, it's one thing to pass an offering plate. It's another thing to say, here am I, Lord, send me. You get the difference? It's one thing to say, oh, we're going to pass the offering plate, and people reach in and say, oh, there you go, God, I did my business. It's another thing to say, I'll do that. I'll take care of that. Or if asked to do something, I'll be willing to do that. Okay. Now, I know I'm preaching to the choir tonight. You know what I'm saying by that? You guys show up on Wednesday night. You're the ones that I think everybody in this room is involved or has been involved in many things over the tenure I've had here. I'm just simply saying that we live in a culture that's not like that. And that culture sometimes influences even the best of the best. Sometimes that culture influences Christian churches into doing just what Israel is doing here. We just kind of get into the motion and think that that's what God's looking for. And that's not the affliction God's looking for. He's looking for us to do something, you know. And so that kind of causes us to get out of our comfort zone, doesn't it? If I got to go down and just, you take this list, loose the bands of the wickedness. That means I got to go down where wickedness is, and I got to touch that. And I've got to try to loose people out of that. That's not a comfortable place. How about this one? To undo heavy burdens, which means probably I've got to go down and I've got to lift a burden off of somebody, and maybe I have to carry that burden for a while. That's not very comfortable. Or how about to let the oppressed go free, which means I have to go down into their bondage, whatever it may be, and I have to figure out a way to see if I can get them free. And that can be frustrating, because sometimes you can open the cage for some people and they don't want to come out. They want to stay in. But you do it. Or you break every yoke. You deal bread to the hungry. You bring those cast out and poor to thy house. You cover the naked. Thou hide not thyself from thine own flesh. Focus. You know, how many of us, we're okay sometimes witnessing to strangers, but our family and friends that need to be saved, we're kind of, I don't want that kind of coming back on me. He says, thou hide not thyself from thine own flesh. Verse 8, these are the if clauses. Now notice the then clauses. If Websterville focuses here like this, if any congregation focuses like this, then this is what's going to happen, I promise. So they're approaching God, but the wrong way. But if we approach God with a different attitude, and this will be this is the result. It says, then shall thy light break forth as the morning, and thy health shall bring forth speedily, and thy righteousness shall go before thee, and the glory of the Lord shall be thy reward. And then he gives us another then. Then shalt thou call, and the Lord shall answer, and thou shalt cry, and he shall say, here am I, if thou take away from the midst of thee the yoke, the putting forth of the finger, and the speaking of vanity. So the acceptable outcome. So then, number one, you get the glory of the Lord. That's what he's talking about. He says, number one, thy light will break forth as morning. Thy health will spring forth speedily. Thy righteousness shall go before thee. The glory of the Lord shall be thy takeaway. That's what we get out of that. And I have to put in that phrase, is there anything better? Is there anything better? No matter what's going on around me, to know that God's presence is with me, is there anything better? And we have to come to the obvious conclusion and answer. The answer is absolutely no. There is nothing better than to know God's closeness, no matter what's going on. And so, the glory of the Lord. And then number 2, the grace of the Lord. Because when we look at verses 9 and on, he says, for instance, he says, then shalt thou call, and the Lord shall answer. Thou shalt cry, and he shall say, Here I am. Whoa, that's good stuff. And so, he goes on to say, Take away the midst of thee the yoke. How about it? Go right ahead. Verse 10. So we see that he'll answer our prayer. He has a comforting presence with us. He's going to have a guiding hand with us. He's going to bring gifted people to us. Notice where this begins to go. And then there's problem solving that goes on. Verse 11. And the Lord shall guide thee continually, and satisfy thy soul in drought, and make fat thy bones. And thou shalt be like a watered garden, and like a spring of water, whose waters fail not. And they that shall be of thee shall build the old waste places, and thou shalt raise up the foundations of many generations, and thou shalt be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of the paths to dwell in. Maybe I got it all wrong, I don't know, but when I walk down through Barry, I see a whole lot of breach. I see a whole lot of deterioration. I see a whole lot of generational sin going on. God says, I can fix all that. I can fix all that. But God's people have got to be getting it right. Their approach is not just to appease. They need to be outdoing it. When they start to sacrifice, and their focus is on the less, not those that have the more. When we start to say to the children that are in these situations in some of these homes, I don't think there's any, I can even say this. So you might want to know what this picture of this child is here. This child died in January. Strangled. In Vermont. Happens a lot. A lot of kids getting pretty beat up around here. So what I say by that is, my plea to God, and why I'm so thrilled about Websterville and the possibilities here, is that I think we're right in the, can it get any darker anywhere else in the state? I don't know. I've been around in a couple places, but it seems pretty dark sometimes right here in this area. I mean, if you think about Vermont, I don't think the statistics change, but Vermont leads the country in opiate addiction. And Barry is one of the leading places in the state for opiate addiction. Barry is one of the leading places in the country for opiate addiction. Do you get where I'm going with that? And what opiate addiction does, it totally destroys homes and families. Diana works with Barry Town, which is in I think a better situation than Barry City, but her job is to help identify these vulnerable children and make sure at least they get a bag of groceries every weekend when they go home, so that they at least know they have something to eat on the weekends. How many do you do? About 100? She does 100. Barry City does more. Meaning that of those two schools, meaning roughly around 1,500 kids between the two schools, that nearly 10% of kids are being sent home with grocery bags to make sure they got good food on the weekend. Wow. You get what I'm saying? About 30% of Barry City. So we're talking a very vulnerable situation for children. What's that? That's the other thing, we don't know, do we? But you'll find that a lot of those kids know how to hide it. They know how to tuck it away somewhere just in case. The sad thing is that some of these parents, they'll take what kids get at Christmas time, go out and try to sell it to get money, so they can go back to the drugs and the alcohol. And that's in our backyard. We're not talking some slum city in India or Africa. We're just talking right here in our backyard. You get what I'm saying? Now, I know it may sound vivid and it may sound hard, But time's running out. I think the Lord's coming soon. You get what I'm saying? I think we've got kids that need some assistance. We know that from our personal relationship with DCF, the opiate situation and the drug situation has just really turned kids' lives upside down. And when I look at the fact that this ministry has been very concentrated on youth, whether it was Awana programs years ago, or whether it's a school now, or whether it's a youth program going on right now, or it's a teen program going on Sunday night, guess what? I'm going to tell you why we're seeing more people sitting in the auditorium on Sunday mornings. It's because of that spirit. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's my opinion, but it's based on that scripture. When we make the poor, when we make the needy our focus for the service of God, to try to relieve what they're under, to try to bring the gospel to those people, God says, hey, let me give you more. You've been faithful with a few things. How about we give you some more? Because there's a lot of work. And you know what I'm thinking here in Vermont? There's a lot of work that needs to be done. So I'm praying for more laborers. And I'm not asking, honestly, I'm not asking that we put things in here so I can put it in my wallet. I'm simply saying, hey, let's see if we can rescue some kids out of the streets and bury. Let's see if we can come up with a way to get into some areas that start to really make some impacts, and we start seeing kids raised up out of these things, and the generational sins are stopped, at least here and there. Do you get what I'm saying? And so, when it comes to the missions conference this weekend, when it comes to what we can do, let's just kind of pour it out to God. Let's just kind of allow God, even if He has to take us out of our comfort zones, to start saying, hey, you know what? Here am I, Lord. Send me. Here am I, Lord. Do with me what you will. I trust that wherever you want to put me, whatever you want me to do, however you want me to go, however you want me to give, I don't care what it is, Lord, whatever that is, I'm willing to trust you, because you know what the best place is for me to do what you have equipped me to do. I'll go there. I'll do that. I'll find a way. Okay? And so, he says then another if here. Verse 13, if thou turn away the foot from the Sabbath, from doing thy pleasure on my holy day. So in other words, he says, turn away from what's making you so pleasurable on my holy day. And he says, and call the Sabbath a delight, not like a, I've got to go to church again, attitude. The holy of the Lord, honorable, and shall honor him, not doing thy own ways, nor finding thy own pleasure, nor speaking thy own words. Then shalt thou delight thyself in the Lord, and I will cause thee to ride upon the high places of the earth, and feed thee with the heritage of Jacob thy father, for the mouth of the Lord hath spoken it. Sounds like a pretty good thing. I want that promise, don't you? I want that promise. I have sought that promise. I believe in that promise. And you know what? I've seen God fulfill it. In just a short amount of time in my own small ministry, I've seen God do some amazing things based on that text and that text alone. There's about 3,000 other promises that God would love to fulfill in all of our lives. So with that, let's go to the Lord in prayer. We'll take some prayer requests while you're getting those things out. Just want to update you on a couple of things. We now are